Okay, folks. So we're just having some technical difficulties here. Hopefully, we're just getting them ironed out. The aforementioned Patrick, my fellow Richard Geek, is watching live and let me know that for some reason there was no sound pushing through. So we're just checking to make sure that everything's working okay right now. And it looks like we're good. It might have actually just been a levels issue because nothing changed here on our end other than I turned my microphone volume up. So, that being said, let's get back into it, okay? So, I'm going to start right from the top. What the hell? Why not? I'm not even going to roll the credits again, or the titles again. I'm just going to run with it. Welcome back, Trekkies and Trekkers, to another episode of Treknicity Live. This is the show where I talk about everything to do with Star Trek. And as always, no topic on this show is taboo. I will talk about anything, whether it be good, bad, or indifferent. And in this episode, we're going to talk about Klingons and Romulans. You know, those two classic Star Trek villains. Before I go on with this, though, I do want to again apologize for Friday. There was no show. We did not get a chance to get it recorded. That was mainly an oversight on my part, and yeah, we'll do better to get those out and ready to go. Just I got really busy on Friday, and we didn't have the episode recorded. That being said, on Wednesday's episode, we're going to have Patrick, my fellow Red Shirt Geek, back for another fantastic episode where we talk about Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. We're going to basically cover everything because that's Patrick's favorite, my second favorite, but still. Anyways, we're going to get right into it now. So let's talk about Romulans and Klingons. Romulans and Klingons both appeared all the way back in the original series. As you might remember, Klingons looked like kind of Puerto Ricans in gold lame. Romulans just looked like Vulcans. And, of course, that was actually a big sticking point when Balance of Terror came out. And as part of the story, basically, Lieutenant Kyle had a big issue with Spock because, of course, they had never seen a Romulan before, and suddenly, it looked like Vulcans. So the Vulcans must be working with them. They weren't, of course. So, with that being said, the whole thing with Klingons, of course, they were designed to be the bad guy that the Federation would deal with largely, and they do appear in several episodes, more so than the Romulans, but still, the Klingons, as we know them, they're basically this warrior race. They are vicious, they're unforgiving. They're all basically about conquer and conquest and doing whatever the hell they want and expanding the empire. With that being said, though, they did make a huge change into Star Trek The Motionless Picture, where we see what we call now the Imperial Klingons, which are the Klingons with the ridged foreheads. And that was largely a design choice for the movie, and it just kind of stuck and was kind of cool, and that's, whenever you think of a Klingon, that's what you think of. You think of the big burly guys with almost battle armor uniforms and the ridged foreheads and long black hair. Romulans, though, on the flip side of the coin, they are a conquistador race as well, and they are a little bit more, think of them, very much they were modeled after the Roman Empire. They said about expanding the empire. Of course, everything's for the empire. They are largely modeled after the Roman society. Even the twin planets of the Romulan homeworlds of Romulus and Remus are, of course, named after the Roman rulers and the brothers. They are pretty much. I see them largely as the same way. I see them very much like the Klingons, just different. In different so far that the Romulans tend to be more cunning. Klingons, they go at it like hammer and tongue. Like a bull in a china shop. Sometimes they have absolutely no subtlety when it comes to the viciousness of their ways, of their warrior ways. Romulans, they tend to be a little bit more reserved. In Star Trek, the Romulans were the ones who invented the cloaking device, which made them serious predators. And as again we saw in Balance of Terror, they were able to utilize that cloaking device to insane use to take out several Federation outposts along the neutral zone. Again, you come back to the Klingons. They are very much, they're militaristic, they're proud, they're honor bound. There is, you do not slight a Klingon at all unless you want your ass handed to you. Romulans, they play the long game. That's the big thing. They definitely play the long game. Now, when we go back to talk about Klingons in the original series, they're the two ones that we saw the most were Kor and King, and they were ruthless. They were very much like I thought the Romulans are now. The Romulans are just those cold-blooded, they have no sympathy, yet, again, they work very hard to play the long game. They're also not afraid, though, to show you how vicious they can be when you let them off their chain. So that's how the Klingons started in the original series. When we moved to the motion picture, again, we saw Mark Leonard, who originally played the Romulan commander in Balance of Terror, and then went on to, of course, play his most famous role of Sarek through the rest of the series and through all the movies, and even into Star Trek The Next Generation. But he played the Klingon commander in Star Trek The Motionless Picture. There you go, Patrick. I thought you liked that one. And then from that point, we see him again in Star Trek 3 with Commander Krug, and then and his first officer Maltz. Then we see them again in Star Trek 4 with the Klingon ambassador, who was the actor. I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but he actually played Herman Munster, I think, in the newer the Munsters TV show. I think that took place in the 90s. We see them again in Star Trek 5, and then they come back again. They play a huge part in Star Trek 6: The Undiscovered Country. So they're back again and again and again. But we see we see them the same way. We see them the Imperial Klingons, and of course, as we mentioned before in Star Trek: The Motion Picture Review, that they don't really explain the difference. Like they tap on it a little bit just for the sake of wetting your whistle during the DS9 episode Trials and Tribulations. Of course, Worf makes the comment, "We don't talk about it very much," or whatever. But of course, in Enterprise Season 4, they very much go in depth in a couple of episodes. It was a 2 or 3 episode story arc where they talked about how the Klingons who lost their forehead ridges, it was due largely to a virus that they contracted when they were trying to edit augment DNA, which are the genetic supermen from Earth. They were trying to mix them in with Klingon DNA to make Klingon supermen, and of course, what it did is it mutated into a virus, and those who survived the illness were actually their forehead ridge dissolved, and they looked human. So, I mean, it was kind of a little bit of a shoehorned way of getting them in there, but still, it worked. It made sense, and it was a good story. I mean, it was a good story arc. Romulans. Now, here's the Romulans are a little bit different. I mean, there was no real explanation for it. They tried to kind of touch on it a little bit with the Abrams verse movies and such like that, but they just didn't do a good enough job, in my opinion, of explaining how all the differences came together. So in Balance of Terror, where we first see a Romulan, they look just like Vulcans. They basically have similar haircuts. They have the same pointed ears. It turns out, of course, that we find out that Romulans and Vulcans have this, or Romulans are basically prehistoric Vulcans. So they touch on it, like they bring them in again in Operation Annihilate. And then, no, sorry, my apologies, not Operation Annihilate, the Enterprise incident. And again, basically, it looks like Vulcans. I mean, they just acted like Vulcans with emotions. Then we started to see the change into, and actually even when you come into Star Trek 5 and Star Trek 6, when you see the only two times you see the Romulans in the classic series movies, in Star Trek 5 you had Caitlin Dar, you don't even see her pointed ears. For whatever reason, they chose to make her wear this stupid headpiece that covered her ears. Who knows? Then we see the Romulan ambassador Nonklus in Star Trek 6. He just kind of looks like, again, looks like a middle-aged Vulcan, you know. Then we started seeing the changes when in Next Generation. If you ever watched any of the episodes that have the Romulans, you'll notice that they have ridges on their eyebrows are like this. They come in like this, and that served to delineate or differentiate them from the Vulcans. And that's how you could know a Vulcan from a Romulan, and that made sense to me. They didn't really explain why there was that change. Mind you, they didn't really explain until much later the reason why the Klingons changed. Now, when we talk about Romulans and changes, there was another big change from the Next Generation to the Abrams verse, the Kelvin timeline movies, where we saw Nero and his crew, who had, again, they didn't have the forehead ridge, but they had tattoos on their head, and they tried to explain that in the build-up miniseries comic book before the movie came out, that they were actually their signs of mourning. You know, when Romulans go into mourning, apparently they tattoo their heads. I'm gonna call bullshit on that one because we've never seen any of that ever before. Now, with the Klingons, you know, when they have the death ritual, when somebody dies, they hold their eyes open and they howl to let Sto-vo-kor know, or the afterlife know, that a warrior is on his way. That has remained pretty consistent. With the Romulans, they just changed it. I think it's just because J.J. Abrams said, you know what, my movie, I'm gonna do whatever the hell I want, and he did. And I guess in a number of weeks when we actually cover those movies, yeah, I'm going to probably get a little antsy about it. So, again, we've got two distinct races, and they're both very warlike, but in different ways. The Klingons are very regimented military, as in, they believe in the structure of command. The Romulans do too, but they tend to be a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess more reserved about it. They tend to look at it more as a regalness or a royalty when it comes to their rank and their military. Of course, they handle it largely like anybody else does, and of course, like the Roman Empire, because of course the leader of the Romulans is the Praetor, whatever, and then they have centurions and such like that. So very much, there is no mistaking that they are grounded very deeply in Roman society as far as their inspiration goes. Now, you do see, like, if you read some of the old source material back came out in the 80s and 90s, they went on a lot about how the Romulans and Klingons hated each other. Now, what was kind of cool is in Star Trek 3, we saw that Commander Krug had a bird of prey that, didn't look like any Klingon ship that had ever been built before. Of course, it looked Romulan because the Romulans tend to make their ships look like birds. Which were modeled after the birds of prey from Romulus. So they kind of wrote a good explanation that the Romulans and Klingons had a technology exchange. The Romulans got the fortified Klingon D7 model, which we saw in the Enterprise incident, and then the Klingons got some birds of prey ships with working cloaking devices, which explains how the Klingons got their cloaking device. Now, I liked how they talked about that. That was a good story. It was a good bridge. It made sense. in the Enterprise incident, we saw the Romulans actually had the D7, so it's like, oh, D7s with cloaking devices. Ooh, interesting. And spoiler alert, the Enterprise crew manages to steal the cloaking device. Haha, funny that. So I guess to kind of wrap up my comparison and my compare and contrast of these two races, Klingons, they are warriors. Their blood runs hot. And with that being said, they are very much the brutal, vicious, savage race. If you want to think about it, as far as they don't look too favorably upon those that they consider weak. Romulans, they are more cold-blooded and calculated. They will very much hide in the shadows. They'll fire off and then they'll run away and they'll disappear and they'll come back again. So, even though very similar as far as the their styles, or sorry, their philosophies go, they're very different as far as how their execution and their practices are. So, again, if you've watched any of the TNG episodes where both the Klingons and the Romulans show up, they're pretty cool. In fact, actually, there's a first season episode, maybe even a second season, where we have the Romulans and Klingons have to basically kind of, there's some bad blood, and a wounded Romulan officer has to have an infusion of blood, and it can only come from a Klingon who was Worf, and Worf's like, no, and yeah. But anyways, yeah, there's still a lot of bad blood. Anyways, I'm going to stop waffling and rambling on about, because I could talk about these guys forever, and I could go back and forth on the differences and similarities of the two races. But anyways, I just want to wrap this up and say I hope you enjoy watching this show. If you do, please click the like and subscribe down there, and click the little bell icon so you know when we go live or when we put out a video. The Red Shirt Geeks are working to build lots of different things. Patrick has got his new show, PMGM, in the works right now, and of course we'll have DOA back at some point. And the show itself, Treknicity, again, I'm still working on developing the more produced version of it. I've already got the first episode written. It's just a matter of getting the time to actually sit down and record it and then edit it and put it out. In the meantime, I will continue doing these episodes. So again, this week, on Wednesday, we will have a review with Patrick on Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, which is going to be awesome. And then on Friday, I haven't quite figured out the episode for that one yet, but sure enough, I will have it ready to go, and I have it recorded and ready to release on Friday. In the meantime, I wish you all very well. Live long and prosper, and as always here on Treknicity Live, I wish you to rock out with your Spock out. All right, folks, take it easy. Bye-bye. Until next time.